So, now in this video, we present the climate change topic. In particular, we explain the climate module of MEDEAS, which calculates the influence of the rest of the modules on the climate and also represents the feedback or consequences of the climate impacts in the other modules. In session 1, we will summarize how human activities affect the climate system and describe the way the climate system is modeled in MEDEAS. In session 2, we will explain how the damages from climate change are implemented in the MEDEAS model. I will start now by explaining human influence in the climate system. The climate on Earth is a very complex system of rich physical, chemical, and biological feedbacks within and between the components of the Earth's climate system. Human interference in the climate system is by means of three main processes. First, by global emissions of the so-called greenhouse gases, affecting the atmospheric equilibrium. Second, by changes in the ecosystem and the land. And third, by indirect effects on all the components, including the thinning of the cryosphere and circulation changes in the hydrosphere. The main greenhouse gas emissions are due to fossil fuel combustion, of which carbon dioxide and methane are the most important. On the other hand, there are other emissions like aerosols or other type of gases from different sources that also contribute to the greenhouse effect. In particular, carbon dioxide is the gas which contributes most to this effect. As can be seen in the image, the orange colors represent the carbon dioxide, showing that it has the highest percentage contribution in comparison with the rest of the greenhouse gases. This is why it's so important to understand the carbon cycle that includes carbon dioxide sources and sinks. In addition, there are some ecosystem changes, like for example land use changes, albedo changes, cattle emissions, or biodiversity loss that also affect carbon dioxide, methane, and other emissions. Now, I am going to explain the way this part is modeled in MEDEAS. Climate models, such as general circulation models, are very complex and computationally expensive to use and integrated assessment models. On the other hand, simple climate models encapsulate the insights of the complex models, being easy to use and understand, and also computationally faster. For all of these reasons, integrated assessment models rely on this type of models. And these are the main reasons why we chose the simple climate model zeros to build this module. But the integration of zeros in MEDEAS was not immediate, and we first had to adapt the climate model, taking into account several aspects such as the different start year of the simulation, or including only those elements necessary for MEDEAS. I will now describe the basic structure of the climate module in MEDEAS. First, one of the inputs to the carbon cycle is the emissions of carbon dioxide due to land use changes, whose estimated value can be modified by the user via the input's Excel file. The other input to this cycle is the carbon dioxide emissions due to fossil fuel use, which are endogenously calculated in MEDEAS. Additionally, in the case of methane, the part of its emission associated to the extraction, distribution, and combustion of natural gas is also calculated within MEDEAS. On the other hand, the other greenhouse gases are included via their explicit cycles, and the emission input to each cycle is exogenously set, taking as reference the representative concentration pathway scenarios. The user can select one of these scenarios via the input's Excel file. This means that you can choose between high, moderate, or low mitigation scenarios for these gases. And now, based on the gas concentrations in the atmosphere, which is an output to each gas cycle, the total radiative forcing is obtained. Exogenously adding the total Montreal Protocol gases radiative forcing on the one hand, and on the other forcings like aerosols or albedo effect, taking the RCP scenario chosen by the user as reference. The sum of all radiative forcing determines the total radiative forcing on the system, which represents the thermal imbalance of the Earth. In this way, increasing radiative forcing translates into temperature increase. And this response depends on the climate sensitivity parameter, which is the equilibrium temperature change in response to changes in the radiative forcing. This parameter can be modified by the user via the inputs file. In view of this, the climate module consists of different parts that are linked. And now, as an example, we will see in more detail one of the main parts of this module, the carbon cycle. As explained before, this is the gas which contributes most to the greenhouse effect. The carbon cycle consists of stocks of carbon in the atmosphere, biosphere, mixed ocean layer, and 4 deep ocean layers. As the atmospheric concentration of carbon rises, its uptake by the ocean and biosphere increases, and carbon is gradually stored. In this model, the carbon storage in the biosphere is simplified into 2 stocks, biomass and humus. The atmospheric flux to the biomass consists of net primary production, and this decreases with rising temperatures. On the other hand, the interaction between the atmosphere and the mixed ocean layer involves a shift in the chemical equilibrium, which shows that the ocean's capacity to absorb carbon dioxide decreases as the atmospheric concentration and the temperature rise too. Finally, within the deep ocean, transport of carbon occurs. This temperature feedback, which affects the biomass and ocean carbon uptake, can be activated or deactivated by the user. And the same is true of the feedback that includes the sensitivity to temperature of methane emissions from biological activity. And this is how the carbon cycle is modeled in MEDEAS, including all the variables involved and the relationships between them, the biosphere, the ocean, and the temperature feedbacks. But how do all this climate change impact on the rest of the modules? In the next session, Íñigo Capellán will describe the way this damage is modeled in MEDEAS. You can find the cited bibliography and figure credits in this slide. And thank you very much for your attention.